stick by you all the way through.
Welcome back to Her Rules Radio. So happy to have you here. I'm Alexandra Jameson, your hostess and your health and life coach in your pocket, in your ears. So this last weekend, I was honored, excited, loved leading a retreat, a private one-woman retreat for one of my one-on-one clients. I crafted a 3-day experience for her where we explored root causes of her discontent with her body, habits that were keeping her stuck, but also created really beautiful experiments and gave her space and freedom to be an artist, to write about what was going on for her, did a lot of exploring and some really fun adventure. We went sea kayaking. We were in San Diego. We saw a bunch of sea lions. It was a powerful, moving weekend and experience. And she told me that she felt like a queen after, that it's just what she needed to heal and move forward. And I love doing this work, supporting powerful women at the top of their game. They're really successful women, successful adult human beings who are their moms and their mentors, and they have bigger aspirations for their health, for their bodies, for their lives, and a real love for personal growth. And planning these retreats is one of my favorite things to do. It's one of the biggest things that I love doing in my work as a coach. And women tell me that these retreats are life-changing. But not all moms can do this work or get that level of support. And I wanted to share with you something that I'm participating in as we come up to Mother's Day here in May. And it's called Black Mama's Bailout. The week before Mother's Day, organizations in dozens of cities across the country will bail out as many mothers as possible who otherwise would spend Mother's Day in a cell simply because they can't afford bail. Now, National Black Mamas Bailout Day will give incarcerated moms an opportunity to spend Mother's Day with their families and build community through gatherings that highlight the impact of really destructive bail practices in our communities and on families. So let's talk about bail for a moment. In theory, bail is intended to guarantee court appearance. People accused of a crime post their bail with the court and then recover the bail money when their cases are finished. In practice, bail criminalizes poverty. People who can't afford bail have two options. They can either spend weeks or months in jail waiting for trial or plead guilty, even if they're innocent. And the harms of this pre-trial incarceration, right? Poor people who can't afford to post bail. What impact does this have? Well, they lose their jobs. They can lose their housing, trauma, criminal convictions. And the system particularly targets Black and brown families, homeless, LGBTQ people, and people living with disabilities and chronic illness. So this theory that we have that bail is this fair part of the justice system is actually not true. And it's really putting a lot of families through a lot of pain. So this Black Mama's Bailout Day, I am going to be giving some money to the organization in my stepmom's name. And it's going to help get at least, I hope, a few moms out so that they can spend time with their families on Mother's Day, right? These are people who haven't even been convicted of a crime. They haven't been convicted of anything. They've been accused of something and they just can't post bail. So what if we could get together and put some money towards these organizations that are helping reconnect moms with their families? You can go to nomoremoneybail.org and donate a little money. You can also search your state to see if there is a statewide program near you. I'm going to go ahead and give my money to nomoremoneybail.org, and they'll put the money towards moms who haven't been convicted of anything. They're just sitting in jail because they can't afford to pay bail. Up next, we have two incredible women who are helping a lot more women become moms. Alexandria DeVito, who is a functional nutritionist and a dear friend. She was a client of mine who focuses on women's health and fertility. And she holds a dual master's degree in a Master of Science in Human Nutrition and a Master's Business Administration from Harvard. She also holds certifications as a yoga teacher, personal trainer, and eating psychology coach. And Dr. Sarah Rahal, MD, is a double board certified pediatric neurologist who is dedicated in her career to the care of children with neurological diseases. And together, these two women are the co-founders of Xandara, a platform to help women and couples enhance fertility, get preggo, and optimize their children's health outcomes, all beginning prior to pregnancy. Got to stay tuned all the way through to the end. And if you love the show, all this information is free to you. But the show is not free to produce. So if you would go and put up a review of the show, it would really help us get more podcast sponsors, get the word out there, find more friends who want to subscribe to it. Go on over to iTunes, leave a review. It really helps us grow the show. All right, here we go with the founders of Xandara. All right, we've got the lovely team of Alexandria and Sarah here. Hi, Xandara, the founders. How are you today? So glad to have you.
We're so glad to be here.
Thanks so much for having us.
This is great. So let's talk about trying to get pregnant. It's so funny. I mean, my very first question is, I remember talking to my mom who had my brother in 1969. And she was like, oh yeah, me and my friends were terrified of getting pregnant. And how it was such a big deal when the pill came out and birth control, like, oh my gosh, now women can finally like have a little bit of freedom in their sexuality. And now, like probably 90% of my girlfriends are having a hard time getting pregnant. Like not getting pregnant is the big fear. So tell us about what your mission is. What are you ladies working on? What are you achieving here?
Absolutely. So it's so true. I mean, we spend so much of our life trying not to get pregnant. And then when the critical moment comes, the big reveal, when we decide, okay, it's finally time, cue the music, cue the bedtime ritual, and, nada, nothing happens. It's very, very anticlimactic for a lot of women and a lot of couples. And so really at Xandara, what we're trying to do is a couple of things. First and foremost is educate women around, modern day sex ed. Probably the last time that you learned about how to get pregnant was when you were 13 and you were told, if you sit next to a guy and he happens to, sneeze on you, well, you better be careful because you could get pregnant. And, there's been a lot of emerging science since, the 20 years or maybe 30 years since you've been sitting in that sex ed classroom that we want to share. Science around epigenetics, science around egg health, just so much good stuff. And education is the way that we want to empower women to realize that they have so much more control over their fertility than they believe. Just like, when you, as you referenced, birth control came out, there was control over timing. There's a lot of science to suggest that there is a lot more autonomy we have over the birth outcomes of our children and even the fertility process itself. So a big piece is around education and empowerment. And then the last piece is, what's information without action? And so we really want to focus on enabling women with practical and tactical tools to help them not only improve their fertility, but also optimize their children's outcomes down the road.
Okay, so tell me about both of your backgrounds, because Alexandria, I've known you for a while now. We've spent time in New York City hanging out. Why did you start this? How did you both come to this idea to partner up?
Yeah, so we have a unique set of backgrounds that we each bring to the table here. So I am trained as a functional nutritionist and also have about a decade of corporate experience. So I have 2 master's degrees. I'm an absolute learning junkie, both on the business side and on the nutrition side. And when I was working as a nutritionist, what I kept seeing over and over again with my clients was a lot of women struggling with hormonal challenges. And that was linked in a lot of cases to fertility challenges. And at the same time, I was also personally seeing a lot of friends who were smart professional women who were willing to spend a lot of money on this problem, do anything to solve the problem of hormonal challenges and fertility challenges, but they couldn't find any resources to actually help them effectively solve the problem. And I couldn't believe it. It seemed like such a straightforward thing. But when I actually dove into the research, I really tried to see what was out there, and it was actually pretty pathetic. There are a ton of resources on pregnancy, what to do once you're pregnant, how to eat for pregnancy, how to move for pregnancy, but there was nothing around how to get pregnant, and not only that, how to set the stage for a healthy baby down the road. So for me, it was really all around the how to get pregnant phase and the fertility phase. And, my co-founder, Sarah, here had a completely different perspective on the other side of the equation.
So I'm actually a physician. I'm a pediatric neurologist, and I've spent most of my career in academic medicine treating children with an array of neurodevelopmental disabilities, including things like cognitive problems, ADHD, and autism, all of which have been rising at pretty exponential rates over the past couple of decades. And there's an alarming lack of support that we can give at this stage of the game, because really the cow's out of the barn by the time kids come to see me in my neurology practice. And while there's so much we can do to support children and families who are struggling with these kinds of chronic illnesses, the truth of the matter is that if you really are able to dive into the science and look at what the emerging research is showing about these conditions, there is so much intervention that can be done even before a woman gets pregnant to set the stage to help prevent conditions like this from happening in the first place. And so taking a step back and realizing that that is the most impactful time where we can really set the right stage for our children's health is what brought Alexandria and I together, because there's such overlap in the kinds of lifestyle interventions and health strategies for women in the pre-pregnancy phase that have dual benefits, both improving their fertility as well as helping to shape the health outcomes of their children down the road.
So what have you seen in the science, in the literature, talking about, is it just the mother's health that affects whether children develop ADHD or autism, or is it both the mother and the father? What are you seeing about the pre-work that people can do?
Yeah, it's so fascinating because it's really just a burgeoning field that's giving us a lot of information about how much control we can have in the pre-pregnancy phase. And lest we leave men out of the equation, and it is absolutely a two-person game here. So just turning to the science quickly, just to give kind of a broad stroke understanding to you and your viewers about what we're talking about here. There's a couple of new fields that have kind of emerged in recent years that give us a better understanding of just how our health and our lifestyle affects not only our own health, but also our genes in a way which has implications for our future children. So when the DNA code, when the human genetic code was first sequenced a few decades ago, scientists kind of thought, okay, this is it. Now we can explain everything. Once we sequence the genetic code, we're going to understand where all the diseases come from. We're going to be able to intervene and prevent things, and everything's going to be so straightforward. And
it's like, we've got the cookbook. Now we've got the instruction manual for everybody.
Manual. Mystery solved. We got this in the bag. And the truth is that once the code was sequenced, we realized that was not the case. Our genes don't work like a fixed blueprint for life. Our genes work within the context of the environment that we put them in. And so a new field emerged called epigenetics, which toppled the science of straightforward genetics and really showing that the DNA sequence is not the DNA sequence, while the code is fixed, how those genes get expressed is very much in the realm of the environmental influences we put our genes in contact with. So the way somebody eats, moves, sleeps, experiences stress, play, love, mindfulness, toxin exposures, all of these things actually dictate which of our genes get turned on, which of our genes get turned off, which get amplified, which get suppressed. And so similar to an analogy of a computer, which has a fixed underpinning set of hardware that doesn't change. You can put different kinds of software on that computer, which makes it operate very differently. And so similar to that, the environment kind of acts like the software on the hardware of our genes. And depending on that environment, you can get a very different picture. So a woman's lifestyle during the pre-pregnancy phase can create these epigenetic changes in the genes of her cells, including the egg cells, which will eventually form the genetic code of the baby to be. And likewise, a man's lifestyle very much changes the epigenetic code of his sperm cells. And when those two cells come together to make a baby, you have an expression of what those parents' lifestyles were like in the pre-pregnancy phase, and that influence of the environment continues through pregnancy and through early childhood life, ultimately shaping the child. So while a lot of parents are very aware of how much influence early childhood health is on a baby's development, and we focus a lot of energy on keeping kids in very rich and nourishing environments, exposing them to lots of different stimulation and letting them explore their curiosity and doing things like Baby Einstein and Kumon and just really amplifying this early childhood development piece. The truth is we lay the foundation much earlier in the pre-pregnancy phase, and that's where you can really have a lot of impact.
Oh my gosh, is it pronounced Kumon? I always thought it was come on.
That's way better. Keep telling people that.
And for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, it's like a tutoring program that has branches all over New York City. I really thought it was come on. Okay. So that's something unique about your mission, is that you focus on this pre-pregnancy period for women, and I'm assuming for men. I'm assuming that whoever you teach, you're like, hey, by the way, whoever the baby daddy's going to be, like, let's rope him into this too. How far in advance can or should women like start working on this? Like, if they're thinking about having a kid and they're like, I don't know how my epigenetics are doing, do they need to be like, I got to give myself 2 years? Or how much time do they need to work in advance on this?
It's such a great question. And the truth is, anything women can, at any time during pre-pregnancy that a woman can start thinking about this is a great thing. If we actually look at the science of when our egg cells are maturing, for a woman, really that pre-pregnancy phase when our lifestyle interventions can really start making a difference, it's about a year. It's about a year before you conceive your baby. Now, that can be a variable time window depending on a person's individual medical situation. Different people may have different medical conditions that require a different period of time to deal with, manage, and get settled. But for most women across the board, the optimal time window to prepare is about a year before pregnancy. Now, in involving your partner, who is, as we've established, is also a very important part of the equation, the life cycle of a sperm cell is about 3 months. 75 to 90 days.
Yeah, guys only need to be like, great, we're going to get pregnant in April. Okay, it's January. I'll start taking in right now.
So, starting to drop the hint about lifestyle changes probably needs to happen about a year before, but about a 3-month window for your partner to actually implement changes is when the sperm cells will benefit from such interventions.
So one of the things that we like to say is, you should be preparing for pregnancy like you prepare for your wedding, a year in advance with a lot of forethought and intention.
I like it. That's pretty good. What about people like me who just eloped? We're just like, all right, maybe you got to put a little bit more attention. Okay. Well, so that I wanted to back up just a moment because I was wondering, again, I've had a couple of friends who have gone the, freezing their eggs route. And I wonder, do you see that women are jumping too quickly to that egg freezing before, like, are they missing out on a lot of alternative methods that they just don't know about?
So I hesitate here for a moment because I think there is a lot of shame and blame in this game around motherhood and pregnancy and how, you should be breastfeeding, not breastfeeding, standing on your head, twirling around 3 times a day. There's just so much judgment around it that we as a company don't want to be adding to the pointing fingers around what you should and shouldn't do. And I think the truth of the matter is the science is new, just like Sarah was just talking about. The problem is new. Our parents, our grandmothers and our mothers did not have these issues around infertility. And therefore, the solution is new. And so, what I like to say here is that there are so many more options that women aren't even aware of. And that's why we're so delighted to have the opportunity to talk to an audience like yours of, women who are thoughtful, who really want the best for themselves, their families, their lives in all domains of life. And so, coming back to the point around egg freezing, my personal belief is that I think because there hasn't been good education in this area, that women are taking the most educated choice that they possibly can, which is preservation of choice. And that's, I think, why a lot of women are choosing egg freezing. I think that there is preservation of choice in the natural interventions. And we would even say, if you are thinking about egg freezing, a lot of the things that we talk about are still relevant because you still want to set yourself up with the best quality of eggs, with the best quantity of eggs. And by the way, that's regardless of age. We always want to say, oh, it's all about age when it comes to egg health and egg quality. But the science suggests otherwise. Just like any other cell in your body, there's a bunch of different mechanisms that quote unquote age your cells more or less. And that's, do you smoke? Did you have hard charging partying days in your 20s, in your 30s, maybe into your 40s? There are a lot of other factors that come into play when it comes to egg health and therefore, probability of pregnancy and fertility. And so I think the important thing here is that there are so many other factors in your control. And you may or may not choose egg freezing, but even if you do, recognize there are a bunch of lifestyle interventions. There are probably 100 steps that you can take before you get to the advanced reproductive technology stage in many cases. So I think that's how I would think about it.
So this is a pretty unique take on the current I'm going to call it an infertility crisis. I don't want to blow things out of the water, but it really, again, I've had a few friends who I'm really close with who it's been a real challenge for them. And it's very emotional. It's very physical. And it's really financially draining too. It's all encompassing for them. So how, besides this great focus on the pre-pregnancy period, what else is unique about Xandara's approach and how you're supporting women?
Yeah, so I think, we are focused on, you said this infertility crisis, but we're focused on blowing up the spot here because we think no one is talking about this, and they should be. The fact that you have a lot more control over your fertility and your children's health outcomes should be headline news. But this message has not gotten into many doctors' offices. It certainly hasn't seeped into the mainstream. And I think, our approach is unique on a couple of different fronts. I think, number one is just talking about pre-pregnancy in and of itself. It's not a market. People aren't really spending time and energy and thought or even a lot of money in this space right now. And that's because they don't know to spend time and effort and energy here. So we really want to say that, the pre-pregnancy time matters. And, as Sarah was talking about earlier, if you're the type of person who wants to give your children as optimized of a path as possible in terms of their health, in terms of even their intellect and their mood, then this is the sort of thing that we'd encourage you to start thinking about. And then I think the other big thing that's really different about our approach, and I'm going to have Sarah talk about this in a little bit more detail, is a really unique blending between kind of looking backwards and looking forwards, both at, our ancestral heritage and how our bodies were designed to operate, and then looking forward to the emerging science.
So I talked a lot about epigenetics earlier, and while we talk of it as like cutting edge science and, headline news just coming out, what it really in truth is just science giving us a better understanding of how our genes work. It's really looking backwards in a way. It's finding out how evolutionarily our biology operates. And so what's unique about Xandara is that we're kind of looking backwards in many ways in our approach. We're trying to look at how our bodies evolved to survive in the world around them. And, it doesn't help that we live in such a rapidly changing time. Alexandra mentioned, our grandmothers didn't suffer with infertility. The many generations before us didn't. That's because our landscape has changed so much just in the past recent decades. We have this industrialized food process. Our soil is nutrient deplete from all of the over farming and cultivation and the way that we've planted and manipulated our crops and our food supply. We are exposed to 40,000 new chemicals that have been introduced onto the market since the 1970s, many of them not even tested for safety. So we just have this unprecedented level of stress in our jobs and our home life. We're getting less sleep than ever before. We're more socially disconnected than ever before. It's the fact that this modern environment has changed much more rapidly than our evolution has been able to keep up with. So our bodies have adapted to survive in very different circumstances. And if we can understand what those circumstances are and how we can kind of recreate them in our modern life, then we can really biohack our way to better health, better fertility, and better outcomes for our children.
So I wonder if this is such a personal question from me and my own
Bring
life.
it on.
That's what I do with my experts. I'm like, free advice, great.
Yeah.
So do you cover some of the more, I'll call them controversial topics? So about 5 years before I had my son, I was having other health problems that related to this, but I had all my silver fillings removed and replaced and did like this whole mercury cleanse, chelation, etc. And that's kind of like, that's another topic that nobody talks about is silver amalgam fillings that contain mercury in people's heads and how that might not be a good thing. Is that something that you guys cover? Are there other controversial topics that you bring up that people might not have heard about?
Oh, this is a good one. So we are no strangers to controversy, and I'm sure that we're going to be pushing a lot of people's buttons. But quite frankly, I think that's a good thing. And I think, we would encourage any, parent or future parent to be an empowered and engaged advocate. Question any data that you're being given, including, the data that we're giving you. Really, there's so much out there and it's hard to sift through it, but it's really important to be, asking critical questions. I didn't realize that this whole mercury thing was a debate. I mean, the science behind it is very, very clear. So I think one of the really important things that a lot of people overlook when they're embarking on becoming pregnant and even during pregnancy is just going to the dentist and having a cleaning. A lot of, very clear linkages have been made between dental health and overall health. And it relates to the cardiovascular system. It relates to immune system. So I think there's very, very clear linkages between oral health and overall health. And anytime you have chronic inflammation, that's an issue for maintaining a pregnancy. So that's one simple example.
And Alex, I think you bring up a very good, even broader point, which is things like mercury fillings, things like people's heavy metal exposures, people's immunologic status. A lot of these issues are not standard practice in screening for pregnancy health. So a lot of women go into the pregnancy process not really having a good understanding of what their current health status is because it's not routine to do much of this testing to see where women lay. So one of the things that we do at Xandara, while we are not a medical practice and don't provide one-on-one support, we are big believers in testing, troubleshooting, retesting, and being able to measure and empower women to know where they stand. So we have protocols of testing that women can bring to their medical providers so that they can get that kind of information and know how to troubleshoot moving forward.
Very cool. So, hold on. I need to go back a step because I realized that we're using a word that maybe doesn't make any sense to people, which is epigenetics. Why? Because that's a real cornerstone of the work that you're doing with women. Why is it so important? Why is it so relevant to this process of getting pregnant?
So epigenetics is, I'll give the non-physician take and then I can, have Sarah add in. But epigenetics is a fancy word that just means, so genetics is basically mom and dad get together, they have a fancy evening and they make you. In that is basically your genetic code. So you get 50% of that from your mother and 50% from your father. And so that's fixed, as Sarah was talking about earlier. But what happens is those genetic markers actually, depending on the environment that they're in, can get turned on and get turned off. And the reason that it's relevant for pregnancy is those markers that get turned on and get turned off actually are inheritable. And so just like the genes themselves are inheritable, if you're smoking and drinking and having a real party time, it actually predisposes, so therefore changes your epigenetic tags towards one that are more disease prone, and then you pass that on to your future children. Alternatively, if you're singing Kumbaya and you're in, meditation circles every day, and you're eating kale and spinach every, morning, noon, and night, it predisposes your body for happier, healthier, less disease-prone outcomes.
Please tell me that you don't make your program participants sing Kumbaya.
It is recommended. To specifically speak about how this relates with pregnancy and childhood development, you have to think about it in evolutionary terms. So our bodies are infinitely wise. Okay, we have evolved this capability to be able to kind of pre-screen what the environment around us is going to be while we're still in the womb, so that we know which genes need to get turned on and which genes need to get turned off, so that we can best survive in the environment that we're going to be born into. It's our body's way of adapting to the world without having to wait for those millions of years of evolution for our genes to change, right? It's like a quicker way of evolving, adapting to the world around us. So inside the womb, the baby is making these trade-offs based on the information coming in. And the information is coming in through mom, because mom is the environment while baby is developing. So those epigenetic tags based on mom's environment are shaping that baby's genetic expression in the womb. So while, for example, if mom is exposed to famine or malnourishment, that baby is expecting to be born into a world that is where there are scarce resources. And so it's making these trade-offs in terms of which genes are getting switched on and switched off. And so when they do studies in these babies who are born to women who are malnourished, they find that these babies are obese. They develop cardiovascular disease later in life. They even develop schizophrenia later in life. They develop diabetes. That's because their metabolism has been tagged in the womb to hold on to every bit of nutrition it gets for all of its life. So these babies get fat quickly, they get diabetes, they get heart disease, they get all these problems that we're seeing at rampant levels in the modern day. And we can all trace it back to this idea of the baby making trade-offs to try to best survive in the world that they believe is going to be scarce, but then they're born and actually there's abundant resources. And so it becomes maladaptive. And that analogy plays out in many different contexts.
Okay, so why aren't other people talking about this more? I feel like this is such a huge issue, right? It's a growing issue that women can't get pregnant. And there's amazing science that you are sharing, not just here, but in the programs that you have at Xandara. So why isn't anybody talking about this stuff? I don't see this. I'm not seeing this on the news.
I think there's probably a couple of reasons. I think, number one is both Sarah and I are absolutely huge nerds, and we're, not shy about it. And we have poured over hundreds and hundreds of studies and books and podcasts and, medical journals to really understand what the science says. And, I think other people who, don't have such obsessive of an interest in this, pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, early childhood development space may not have done, the extensive research and connected the dots in the same way. And so, I think the science that we're seeing is, not only new, but the interpretation of what that science means and what we can actually practically do about it is different. So it's not just enough to understand what the science says, but then you have to figure out, well, what do I tell women to do about it? Then I think, another piece of it, and we referenced this a couple times, is this problem is new. And, a lot of times I feel like we medicalize pregnancy. And pregnancy is not a medical problem. It is a lifestyle thing, and it is something that we've evolved to do for years and years and years. So thinking about how we address this quote unquote problem, it's insufficient to think about medical avenues and medical technology. It really goes back to the basics. How are you eating? How are you moving? How are you living? And a lot of times those are not the most lucrative paths. So I think, there isn't a tendency to highlight, what you don't do, so I think there's that piece of it. And then I think, a lot of this is not talked about in medical practices because, as I was just referring to, and I'm sure Sarah can talk more to this, is lifestyle interventions are not something that your physician is well versed in. Now there's a rise of health coaches and nutritionists like myself that can partner with doctors to help them help people get the lifestyle intervention care that they need. But historically, that's not something that physicians have been educated on or even instructed in how to do.
I can tell you, though most people probably haven't heard about this, it is mainstream. The CDC, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, it's the main OBGYN professional organization for physicians, all recommend taking time for pre-pregnancy preparation. The truth of the matter is studies and recommendations take a while to make it into medical practice. And unfortunately, the tools that most doctors have available to them, as Alexandria was saying, are not having 2 hours discussion with their patients about their diet and their lifestyle habits and how they can implement changes. Doctors have tools because doctors are fixing problems. Doctors are not really well equipped to prevent problems from happening in the first place. And so this isn't really in the arsenal of medicine, to be frank. It's a lifestyle issue. So while our biggest health organizations across the globe are recommending pre-pregnancy preparation, we're not going to hear about it in our doctor's offices. So it takes a little bit more digging and diligence to find out about it in the first place. And then there really aren't readily available resources to help women actually take action in that regard and know what to do and what kind of changes they need to make. And that's something we are on a mission to change.
So you've given us a lot to think about, and I'm sure many of my listeners are really thinking about all the different steps. Oh my gosh, there might be a little bit of overwhelm for the listeners where this is really touching their heart and their life right now. So what is one thing that you want women who are listening to walk away with?
So that's the one thing that we want to address is this overwhelm. And, our hope is that we've taken the legwork and the guesswork out of the process so that you don't have to. I mean, we recognize, that a lot of our customers are busy women with a lot on their plates and they don't need one more complex thing to handle. But that doesn't take away their autonomy and the importance of their interaction in this process. So I think what we want women to walk away from is a couple things. Number one is that they have so much more control over their fertility and their children's health outcomes than they've been led to believe. So much more control. Second, that there are specific and identifiable things that they can do today, starting today, to affect their children's lifelong trajectory. And that's a trajectory in terms of IQ, in terms of health, and in terms of mood. So the big three, I'll say. And the other thing is that they're in charge, not their doctor, not their sister, not the corner baker. They are the ones in charge of their health and their future children's health. And then finally, to the point about overwhelm, if they want some help, we're here for them. We are absolutely passionate about getting this message out and empowering and enabling women to have more control around their fertility processes and their children's health outcomes. And we can help demystify the process for them. We can hold their hand through the process. We are here to help in any possible way that we can.
So tell me about the programs, the educational product that you guys have at Xandara to help women.
So we have an absolute comprehensive roadmap that we've put together that takes the guesswork out of this process because, like we said, the science is new. There really aren't reliable resources. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and the research is coming in a multidisciplinary way. There's so many different kinds of scientists and kinds of fields that are looking at the data and putting it together, and nobody has time to go through it. So our goal was really to put everything into one actionable place. And so we've created a roadmap for the 1 year leading up to pregnancy that walks women through step by step exactly what steps they need to take and when to optimally prepare themselves and their partner to set the stage for getting pregnant easily and giving their child the best chance of success at life.
Very cool. So where can women find out more about you?
Our website is www.xandara, Xandara.co. So that's the first place. And we have a bunch of blog resources to check out. So we would encourage you to check that out. We're also on Facebook. So come on over, visit us. And the last thing that we wanted to say is, we have this program that's coming out. And, as a token of our appreciation to all of your listeners, we wanted to offer a promo code for our program that's going to be launching soon. So in honor, it's Her Rules 2018. So they can use that promo code, again, HERRULES 2018 to get a sweet discount on our program.
Very cool. So they can go to Xandara.co, and that's Xandara with an X.
Correct.
And use Her Rules 2018 and get a little discount just in time for Mother's Day. I like it.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Sarah and Alexandria, thank you so much. The work you're doing is so important. I know that many, many babies are going to be called either Sarah or Alexandria because of you.
I hadn't thought about that implication.
Thanks so much for being here and for sharing this work.
Thanks
you
for
so
having
much.
us.
Thanks for listening in to this week's episode of Her Rules Radio. And thanks for leaving your review up on iTunes. We'd really appreciate you putting up a 5-star review and a meaningful comment or two about why you love the show. Be sure to share the show with your friends. Just throw the link up on Facebook or Twitter or whatevs. If you love the show, we love having it. Thank you so much. Take good care. We'll be here back next week. Mwah!